I have heard that people at Google are extremely smart, talented, and very good with numbers. I'm a neuroscientist. I love to see for myself that's really true. So I'd like to ask 10 people to come over here. We're going to do a little competition and put this to a test. Please. Otherwise, I'm just going to take the first rows. If nobody dares, you guys here are already doomed. So 5 people over here, 5 people over there. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 5 people, that's 5 people, good. 2 people here, we need 3 more. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to work in 2 competing teams. I'm going to start with the first team over here, and you guys are not supposed to talk to each other. You just watch them and wait that they make a mistake, okay? I'm not as good with numbers, so I need your guys' help. If anybody makes a mistake, let me know. Could you please form a circle? Natalia will be in the middle. So, all you have to do is to count to 100. Okay, can we just give it a try?
1,
2, 3, 4, 5,
6,
7.
Okay,
8.
you can count. That's good. Since you're so super smart, supposedly, I would like to introduce 3 simple rules, okay? The first one is called the evil number 7. So don't say any number that has a 7 in it, like 67 or 87 or something like this. Don't say any number where the multiple, where that is a multiple of 7, such as 77 or 49. Don't say any number where the 2 digits add up to 7, such as in 52. You guys are supposedly smart, right? So when such a number comes up, and it's your turn, and let's take you more in the middle so that you're not confused as a participant.
I can see this.
Great. So when such a number comes up, what you should be doing is, instead of saying the number, you swirl around your own axis. Can you do it? Like this. And when you're back here facing the others, you clap your hand. Can you do it once? And then the third rule is your team must reverse directions. Okay? We just try it quickly. So you go. First one. No, you say 1. Okay. You say 1.
1, 2, 3, 4,
5,
6.
And then you reverse directions. Okay, you got it? Are the rules clear? Please watch them. I'm not such a number person. So, ready, set, go.
1,
2, 3, 4, 5,
6,
8,
9, 10,
11,
12,
13,
15.
16.
Okay, let's give them an applause. Okay, just stay here for a moment. Now, don't talk, don't outsmart me, don't make up any smart strategies, please. Let's see if you can do any better. We take Marina in the middle, so you just hide here. Okay. Okay, ready, set, go.
1,
2, 3,
4, 5.
Okay. I think you can all go back to your seats again. So what did we just experience here? Why was it so hard to count to 100? And why would that matter to you, right? Who cares if they can count to 100? I will tell you why. I will give you a closer look at how the brain works to understand what just happened, and also to help you understand how you can use that knowledge to improve your performance. Okay? At any time, feel free to interrupt me and to ask questions. I love questions, and I love to be challenged. So if something is unclear or you have a little question, just raise your hands and you will get a microphone and you can ask right away. So don't wait to the very end. I'm flexible. So use the possibility to ask right away. So if this is a head, and you can see it from the side with the eyes here, and this is your brain, there's a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, PFC. That's the part of the brain that makes you successful. That's the part of your brain that you use for complex decision making, rational thinking, planning ahead for the future. That's what you need in order to be a high-performing person. Researchers found that already at age 5, you can see if children have well-developed prefrontal cortices. And what they did is they made an experiment where they had people or children sit down in a chair in a laboratory setting, and they said, you can get 1 marshmallow now, and they put it in front of them. Or you can wait for 15 minutes, and then you can get a second marshmallow if you manage to wait for those 15 minutes. Well, then the researchers left the room and left the kid alone with a marshmallow for 50 minutes. You would see some kids that would run for the marshmallow and just eat it, get it over with, right? And some others, they would turn around, ignore the marshmallow, or put it under the table so they didn't have to see it, or play with it and throw it in the air. Crazy things happened. But what researchers found that the kids that were able to wait for just 15 minutes to get a second marshmallow were the ones that were way more successful later in life. They earned more money, they had better jobs, they had better health, they were happier overall. So success in life is correlated with how well your prefrontal cortex is functioning, because it's your prefrontal cortex that helps you to make executive decisions, and it helps you to have executive control. When we did this little experiment over here, and I introduced the rules with the evil number 7 and swirling around and not saying the number and then reversing directions, this was a task aimed to test or to freak out your prefrontal cortex. You had to use your prefrontal cortex to manage these different rules and to do these calculations in your head. The problem is, as we know, the prefrontal cortex fails very quickly, right? And we could all see it here. So we like to think of ourselves as rational beings. We think that we're so smart and we're always in control of things and we're so rational, but that's not how our brains work. But in order to be successful in life, and in order to be innovative, and in order to create new ideas and to be high performing, you will need your prefrontal cortex. So I will show you today how you can improve your prefrontal cortex. But before that, I will show you which other brain areas always run over the prefrontal cortex, because it's a part of our brain that was only fully developed at age 18 or 21. For you, maybe some of you guys here don't even have a fully developed prefrontal cortex yet. If I look at the audience, it's a part of our brain that is the newest from an evolutionary perspective, and it's also the one that takes longest to grow. So, I have 5 kids at home under the age of 6, and they do crazy stuff, and I stay relaxed because I know it's just that their prefrontal cortex is not working fully yet. So, which other brain parts run over the prefrontal cortex? There are many other areas that influence it, but I'd like to highlight one today that we could see in our little exercise and that really determines much of what's going on in our lives. It's a part of our brain called the basal ganglia. What are the basal ganglia? That's where your habits are stored. That's where your mindsets are stored. That's where your belief system is in. So if you think that Brexit is a good idea or that voting for a certain political party is a good idea, that's probably stored in your basal ganglia in your brain. When you have lots of experience, it goes into your basal ganglia. If you think about the little game we did, it aimed also at your basal ganglia, because what did you do that you learned at age 2 or 3 or 1? Counting. All of you know how to count, and the better you know how to count, the more it is represented in your basal ganglia. And once something is in your basal ganglia, you don't get rid of it anymore. Once you know how to ride a bike, or once you know how to count, you can't unlearn it. Once it's there, you're stuck with it, okay? And it will overrule everything else in your brain. So you need to be aware also of habits you create, because they can be very stubborn. To illustrate this, if you think about it, the first time you learned how to drive a car, maybe at your first driver's lessons, that was really something that required a lot of attention. You had to focus on the wheel, you had to focus on pushing the brakes, you had to focus on shifting gears. There was a stop sign. Oh, there's my driver's teacher is talking to me. Oh, what a distraction, right? You're totally getting shivering. This is because you drove with a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. You had to use your prefrontal cortex for driving because you had to think of all the rules. And that's something you had to do consciously. So you did have to pay a lot of attention to that process. Later on, a couple of years later, you drive with your basal ganglia. You can probably, get up in the morning, half asleep, and get yourself to work in your car. I'm not suggesting that's a good idea. I'm just saying you probably do a lot of things while you drive. People talk on the phone, people talk to the person sitting next to them, people eat on their car, people put on makeup in their car, people text while driving, and that leads to a lot of mistakes. But you can get from A to B without even noticing what you did because it's in your basal ganglia. The brain is a lazy couch potato. It likes to make things easy for it. Whatever you do with the prefrontal cortex takes up a lot of energy. There's something that psychologists call ego depletion or decision fatigue. After a long day of heavy thinking and paying attention to things, you're just done with it, right? You don't want to think anymore. You just want to watch Netflix or something like this. You have used up all your willpower at the end of a long day. So the prefrontal cortex is not an unlimited resource. It's a resource that gets depleted easily, that gets distracted easily, and that gets run over by other parts of the brain very easily. Okay? So today I just wanted you to not just talk about the prefrontal cortex, but to make you experience how easily it gets knocked out. So if you want to be successful in life, and if you want to be successful at your jobs and high performing, you need to find ways to make the prefrontal cortex function properly. And there's 3 things we need in order to in order to make our prefrontal cortex happy. And these are the things I would like to show you today. Are you ready for that? Yes. Okay. So here it goes. If this is performance, and I don't mean, how much money you make or if other people think you're smart or, things like that. I'm thinking about how high performing is your individual prefrontal cortex at this given moment. Okay, so this is measuring performance of your prefrontal cortex over here. And here we have stress level. Basically, here you would say you're in a coma sleep, and over here you would be close to panic attack. And in between, there's many different circumstances and situations you could be in. Usually, let's say somebody here calls you up and says, we have this new initiative at Google. We don't know yet if we're going to go through with it. It's just a new idea. Maybe next year we're going to have a meeting about this, but we don't know yet who's going to sponsor it. So could you please put together some PowerPoint presentation for this and some ideas? Doesn't sound very good, does it? So you're going to sit at your desk and you're probably going to clean up your desk and procrastinate and do other things, but your highest performance will not be on this job. This is true for all kinds of routine jobs, such as doing your expenses or checking your emails. You can do a lot of things just with your basal ganglia, right? You will just go through the motions, no effort required. And the performance of your prefrontal cortex will be very low. So now let's imagine that you're supposed to give a presentation in front of your CEO. I know you have your Christmas party tonight, and you now receive an email this very moment telling you, why don't you give a spontaneous speech tonight presenting, your latest results at work? We'd love to hear more about this. It should be 5 to 10 minutes, and just prepare something really fun and energizing for people, engage them, and afterwards we're going to rate you, and this will influence the bonus you get. Okay, something like this. their chances are that your performance is going to be down here because you might be so sweating and terrified. Everybody's watching you, all eyes on you, okay? And then maybe right before you're on it, you realize that all of your numbers are wrong or that, you know, something is not working out with your presentation. When we are under an extreme stress, okay, when we're experiencing stress, our prefrontal cortex shuts down. This is what happens. Your brain will go into fight, flight, or freeze, and this will lead to the fact that our brain just shuts down. Not all parts of the brain, but the prefrontal cortex will shut down because from an evolutionary perspective, if you have to fight a bear in the forest, you don't want to think of 10 different creative solutions of how to fight a bear. You can either fight or flight or freeze and hide under a bush or something like that. So under stress, the prefrontal cortex shuts down. When we're very bored, our prefrontal cortex does not feel motivated to work. And then in both cases, it's your basal ganglia doing the job. When we are bored, we just go and click into our habits. We do the things we always do. We go through the motions. Other people might even think you're performing well. Because if you have good habits, then you can go through a lot in life just with your basal ganglia, right? It all depends on what kind of training you had and what's in there. If you're very stressed, your brain will also rely on your basal ganglia. Because your prefrontal cortex does not work properly anymore, then you also have to rely on instincts. That's why in professions like firefighting and the police and medical doctors who work in emergencies, they train people a lot. Psychologists call this overtraining, overlearning, because they want to make sure that people have the right kind of action stored in their basal ganglia. So in the military, for example, you train how to pull the trigger 100 million times so that when the emergency situation comes up and your prefrontal cortex shuts down, you know exactly what to do and you make that decision within milliseconds because the prefrontal cortex is slow, but your basal ganglia are quick and they work without you not even noticing. They just go on autopilot. Okay, but this is where you want to be with your prefrontal cortex, right? If you want to be innovative, if you want to come up with new ideas, if you want to create something new and exciting in your company, you have to engage your prefrontal cortex. As you can see, there's an inverse due correlation between stress level and performance. If there's too little stress, you will just do business as usual. People might even go into bore out. People love what you do. You might get compliments for your work, but it's a bit boring and irrelevant. And you just do it, but it's, nobody cares about your work. And over here, you might have a situation with too many deadlines, too many people wanting stuff from you, bad bosses who, follow after you and give you bad feedback all of the time. Things like this can really wear down your prefrontal cortex. So how can you get up here? When we reach peak performance, we lose concept of time. If you ever had a moment at your work or in your free time when you really were performing at your best, it could be in sports, it could be in music, it could be in arts, it could even be at your job, you lose the concept of time, you're fully present here now, and you love what you do. Usually this is associated with it's a joyful experience. Research shows also that when we're in this state of mind, we are 5 times as productive. 5 times as productive, that's a lot. You could save a lot of time if you know how to get there whenever you want it, whenever you need it. Rather than spending most of your time here or here, for your most strategic task, for your most important decisions, for the things that truly matter, you should know how to get here. And there are 3 things you need. And I call them fun, fear, and focus. Why should you have fun at work? Aren't you paid to work? Shouldn't that be what you receive for your hard work? Isn't that enough? Research shows that when people have fun at work, a neurotransmitter called dopamine is released in your brain. I will write it here for those of you who want to remember that. So you have the dopamine, okay? And the dopamine is a real brain booster. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that links into the reward system of your brain. It will make you think faster, it will make you learn faster, and it will make this a very joyful experience. If you think about it, it's not by coincidence that most famous people who excel in some area really love what they do. Because when you're really good at something, then dopamine is released and it makes it even better. So if you want to have more fun at work, this is not just about having free food and all of the gadgets you enjoy here at Google or the after work party kind of fun you're going to have tonight. It's more about, do you truly love what you do? Are you really good at what you're doing? You know, fun related to the task that you perform every day. So my advice to you would be to find a job where you can be really the best in class, not something where you're kind of doing okay-ish. Seek something where your talents can shine, and then you will get bursts of dopamine that will help your brain to perform much better. Other ways to get more dopamine are to, for example, work with surprise and novelty. Every time we get surprised, our brain releases dopamine. Every time something new happens, our brain reacts by eliciting dopamine. So the little exercise we did here a few minutes ago, I also did this in order to get you out of a rut. You come to listen to a talk, but I wanted you to also do something you didn't expect to be doing, because this will give everybody a burst of dopamine and it will make you retain better what I tell you today. Jokes are a good way to get dopamine burst. When people laugh, the brain releases dopamine. So if you want people to learn well and to perform well at work, it might pay off to have somebody really funny at the team. Maybe somebody not really high performing, person not so. I'm serious. Funny people boost everybody's performance. So, you know, if you have this fellow who's not adding much value but making jokes, keep that guy on the team, okay? From a brain perspective, laughs really boost performance. So that's the fun. The second thing is the fear. I don't know if you have experienced that, but I have a friend and she went to a Bob Dylan concert, and what happened is that she hated it. Why did she hate it? Because he was playing new songs she never heard before. She wanted to hear the songs that she knew and loved to sing along, and instead he was going totally experimental on stage, and she said, I didn't know the stuff he was singing, it was okay. Why did Bob Dylan do this? He was upsetting his audience. Nobody loved the concert. People hated it. Well, otherwise I guess he would have been bored to death. If you're Bob Dylan and you've been doing the same thing for 40 years, you don't want to play the same songs. It goes out of your ears. Your ears will explode if you hear that song one more time. I don't know, I'm not Bob Dylan, but I guess that's what was going on in his mind. You need to try new things. You need to push the boundaries. Most people, when you ask them, how can you reach best performance, they say, this happens when the challenge meets your skill set. No, that's not true. This happens when the challenge exceeds your skill set. You need to be slightly over-challenged. Okay, find a job you really love and then push yourself to the boundaries. Get over the top. Do things that are a bit too difficult for you. Do things that are a bit scary. If you're never scared at your job, something's wrong with you. You need to be sometimes a bit nervous. You need to try new things. You need to experiment. If you're always staying in your comfort zone, your brain will react by going into your basal ganglia. Because when we have a slight level of fear, our brain releases a substance called noradrenaline. And noradrenaline is a positive stress hormone. Okay, noradrenaline. Might not be the prettiest flip chart you guys have seen, but so here it is for those of you who want to write it down. So you need the dopamine, but you also need the noradrenaline. When there's no challenge, when there's no deadline, when nobody cares about what you're doing, you will underperform. you will go into basal ganglia mode. So push yourself. If you find yourself too comfortable in your role, you might want to quit your job or go on a job rotation or try something new. If you're getting too comfortable, you will go into bore out. And your brain will think, why should I engage my prefrontal cortex? It costs me a lot of energy and attention to engage my prefrontal cortex. The brain will only do it when it's really necessary. And if there's no challenge, if there's no fear, your brain will not go through all of this effort. So you need to be slightly over-challenged to achieve that. Yes, a question?
Regarding the fear and the stress, well, I'm not an expert in this issue at all, but that hormone is a good one when we are a bit nervous or with fear, but is it associated also with cortisol? Like it happens at the same time, and is it, because I've heard that cortisol is not that good for your performance, so then I would like to know your opinion about that.
Yeah.
Like,
cortisol is also helpful, but it's not a good thing. Cortisol is a negative stress hormone. So what happens with cortisol is that if you have that over a longer period of time in your body, you will go into burnout. A part of your brain called the amygdala, which is processing negative information, will grow. Your prefrontal cortex will shrink. Your hippocampus for learning will shrink as well. So cortisol has a very damaging impact on our brain. But when is cortisol released? Cortisol is released when there's chronic stress over a longer period of time. So let's say you have an awful boss who treats you badly. If you live in a dysfunctional relationship, if you go to your job every morning and you feel that you hate it, that will give you a level of cortisol. Or when you feel so overstressed that you can't sleep anymore, it's the cortisol hindering you to go to sleep. Noradrenaline gives you a positive push, okay? So it gives you a kick. Cortisol will slow things down for you. So this is the matter of whether it's a short-term stress. Here I'm speaking about short-term stress, which is good, or whether it's a long-term stress. And then the number one protection factor for cortisol is actually autonomy. If you think about it, big bosses in large organizations, they work many hours, but they're not as stressed as the people at the bottom who maybe work 9 to 5. Because when we can influence the situation, that's when our brain makes sense of the situation. It doesn't matter whether you work up to 3 a.m. because your boss told you to do that, or whether you work up to 3 a.m. because it's your company and you chose to do that, if you feel that there's a purpose associated with it. So if you want to avoid cortisol, try to take as much control of the situation as you can. Rather than being a victim, go into a more active role to fight the situation. Okay? So that's the noradrenaline and the fear part. What about focus? Imagine some athlete in the middle of a match, like Johnny Sexton, or imagine Serena Williams playing a tennis match. And then in the middle of the match, she's pulling out her cell phone. She says, I just need to take the call, hold on a moment, or I need to check my emails. People would hate that. Their fans would be appalled. People would be shocked. But in the business world, that's how people behave all the time, constantly. People are multitasking. People are constantly checking their emails. People are hardly ever focused, right? And research shows that when we multitask, we make 50% more mistakes, and we take 50% longer to complete the task. Research also shows that today's teenagers have the attention span shorter than the one of an average goldfish. Attention span is going down. Our brains are plastic. We're adapting to new situations. And if you're constantly multitasking, you're not getting better at it. Your attention span is actually going down because your brain says, I never need focused, prolonged attention, right? I never need it, so why should I develop that skill? But it's impossible to reach peak performance if you're not fully focused. Because when you're fully focused and present in the moment, your brain will release a substance called acetylcholine. Let me write it down here for you. As we saw in the little exercise we did in the group this morning, you really had to focus on keeping the 7 out of the game, right? You really had to focus on these complex calculations. Your prefrontal cortex will only work when you're fully focused. It requires attention. It's impossible to get into flow if you're not focused. So what should you do about it? I mean, there's many ways to go. One of them is, for example, to eliminate distractions from the onset, because our prefrontal cortex is a limited resource. If you're going to spend all of your energy suppressing the urge to check your phone, let's say it's on your desk while you work on something, and then you just read a book that told you that multitasking is bad, and then you decided to check it less, you're always going to look at it and think, no, okay, I check it later. Get rid of it, okay? Put it somewhere else. I know that many executives are now doing what is called a meeting of one. When we get in a meeting with other people, we always schedule time, we turn off the phone, we don't check, we really focus on that meeting. But you should be just as critical, rigorous when you have a meeting with yourself. If you really have to put an important presentation together, if you really have to solve an important question, take some time, block your door, don't let people walk in on you. I don't know if you have an open office policy or something like this. Put something in front of your door so that nobody can get in. It's nice to be social, but research shows that when people have too much open office spaces, collaboration, communication actually decreases. You think it would go up, but it actually goes down because people are hiding, because it's impossible to focus if you constantly have your colleagues in your ear. So find a way to truly focus on your work. But I would like to let you in on a little secret. Most books will tell you that eliminating distraction is the right way to improve focus, or that you should go to a mindfulness training course and learn meditation and do yoga, something to train up your inherent ability to focus. That's good. But it's not really working because people know that multitasking is bad and they keep doing it anyhow. Why do they keep doing it anyhow? Because we're addicted to our phones. If you think about it, every time you get a new email or something happens through social media, your brain thinks, oh, there could be something new and relevant going on. I need to check that out. And then you get a burst of dopamine and you get a burst of noradrenaline because there could be something relevant for you. And when we are bored at work, and a little tired and a bit, not fully motivated, you might just as well pick up your phone to see if something new is going on in order to get a quick burst of dopamine. Or when you're very stressed and you want to escape from that situation, your phone could be an escape strategy rather than focusing on what's going on around you, you focus on your phone. And what happens is that every time a new email comes up or something new happens, you get these bursts of dopamine and they link into the reward circuit in your brain and you get addicted to it. And you need more and more and more. As you can see in teenagers, drug use has gone down, but phone use has gone up. So it's the new drug. Basically in the brain, multitasking and the use of mobile devices is treated like an addiction. If you look at people's brain while they're looking at their phone, it's like a brain in love or a brain on drugs. So I would to invite you to create a work environment that is more fun and where you have the right level of fear, and then focus will come naturally. Pay attention to that. You will see that these things are correlated to each other. When you have fun at work and when there's truly something at stake, when it's challenging, your focus will be there immediately. Yesterday, I had a session with executives and they were working on glass. We first wanted to do a fire walk, but then the university building wouldn't allow that. So then we did a glass walk on real, it was 70 bottles of glass shattered, 70 bottles of wine shattered on the floor, and people were walking over it barefoot. Nobody was multitasking while doing that. Everybody was focused. Trust me, I've seen people, everybody was really paying attention while walking because you don't want to hurt yourself, so you have a certain level of fear. And it was kind of fun because it was new and unexpected, not something you do every day, right? Oh, let's walk on glass today. So people had fun, people had fear, and everybody was focused. We didn't even have to tell people to focus. Focus just happened. So if you find yourself having trouble with focus, improve the level of fun, improve the level of fear, and it will come naturally. Thank you.
If you have any questions,
So you were kind of talking a lot about like delaying or postponing gratification. What are some of the more specific things that people could do to try and be better at that?
To delay gratification?
Yeah, because that seems what your kind of thesis is there.
Yeah. Well, find something you truly love and practice it. Research shows that people like musicians who have to practice a lot to get better, they have a better executive control. Because let's say if you spend all of your day playing video games, you get an instant reward all of the time. You know, you just push some button and then it's like, woo, you know, something happens.
I kind of disagree with that, honestly.
Yes?
Because, like, in many computer games, you don't just mindlessly mash on buttons. You actually have to think about your skill set, develop yourself. You have to train. You have to look at other people's, how they strategize a lot of things. And actually, a lot of research recently has been showing that, like, computer games have been increasing one's ability to focus and train oneself and getting in many states of flow, which is what you
Yes,
also talk about.
in the game, but not necessarily outside the game.
But you can apply it elsewhere.
Yeah, but I think you get more instant reward in a video game than if you do practicing the cello,
Definitely, yeah, that I agree.
right? I agree with you that in the moment when you play the video game, you are in flow. You have the fun, you have the fear, you have the focus for sure. But if you do things that give you no gratification in the beginning, such as learning to play an instrument or reading long books with more than 100 pages, right? Then what happens is that your brain will get used to not get everything right away. But a lot of it has to do with parenting. If your parents brought you up to work for things, then you probably will continue to do that later in life as well. So when you have kids, you should be thinking about not spoiling them too much, or they will not have that ability to delay gratification. And then you have what we see today, that many millennials are having suicidal thoughts and are very unhappy because they always got everything from their parents. They never had to work to get anything.
So you're talking about the correlation between performance and stress. So if you were to look at it in a perspective of time as well, because for me the dopamine and the noradrenaline and all of the fun, fear and focus seems to be a little bit more short term. Is that true, or how long can you keep going like that?
It's a short-term thing. You cannot be all day in flow, and you shouldn't be all day in flow. Because if you think about it, when your brain releases dopamine and noradrenaline and acetylcholine, it gives your brain a quick burst, but then it vanishes quickly. If you think about negative stress hormones, such as cortisol, they hit your body and they can stay forever. Let's say I give you 10 things to think about. I say you did great on this and this and this and this and this and this and great job at this and great, hooray. And then I say you have one little area for improvement, one little thing to work on. That's the one you're going to remember. We are wired to focus on negative things. Okay, so what this means is that this is a short-term thing. You should use that if you want to get something really important done, and then it's okay to spend the rest of the day sometimes under challenged, sometimes over challenged. This is something you should use for your most important moments. If you think about athletes, they spend a week training and recovering, and then they just have a 1 hour match. You need that for that 1 hour match. And afterwards your brain will be depleted. What you see is that when your brain releases dopamine, when all of that dopamine is used up, you feel kind of like exhausted. So it's a short-term thing.
So most of us don't really have their offices here. It's really an open plan. And basically, if you want to disconnect, what about, for instance, listening to the music and any specific music, more like classical? Or
I didn't get your question.
so
Could you
the question is, if you want to disconnect, does listening to the music help that, or it distracts you?
So if you want to focus,
Yeah.
whether it's good to listen to music. Well, for some people it's good, and for others it's not. Research shows that this is highly individual. It seems that a little bit of background noise is good if you want to be creative. Here, I've been, here we've been speaking about the flow state, and then music can be good if it's not disrupting you, if it helps you to if it's quieter than more quiet than the people around you. But if you, for example, want to be a bit creative, and if you're designing things, and if you're working in a more artistic way of working, it could be okay to have an office that is like Starbucks, with lots of people running around, because then these distractions will give your brain some impact to make connections that you haven't made before. So the answer is, for some people it's good, and for some jobs it's good if you really have to just concentrate and focus. And if you're working more artistically, it's actually okay to be a bit more distracted.
Thank you so much for the talk. I have a question. When you provide these talks or the courses, like the Walking on Glass, they're probably tailored to the group, but they probably run from your own BSG as well, because you do it so often. What do you do to create the fun, fear, and focus for yourself?
That's a really good question. Actually, the little experiment here we did with the standing up, I've only done this once before. I always create new stuff for myself. Usually, I've just changed it. Now I made it about the prefrontal cortex and the basal ganglia. I always take in other brain parts. I change my presentations, I adapt them. I try to also, for me, the fun for me is the purpose, because I see that people get the benefit from what I'm doing. So if people tell me, oh, this was really helpful, and write to me a year later, then this for me adds value to my life, to what I'm doing. The fear is, public failure. I could be here on stage making a mess, and, somebody asks very smart questions, and I could be standing here, like in full idiot. This can happen, right? And then your reputation is kind of ruined. This will be filmed. So there's always a level of fear. And focus, once I have the fun and the fear, it comes. But I mix things up. And as it happens for me, my engagements get bigger. I get more speeches with more people there, more than thousands. I started out with small groups, and now I get these sometimes big things where I have to design something new. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you, Frederica, for this great talk. And I think there is no doubt that we need to train not our bodies, but our brain as well. And now we have an instruction. Thank you so much.
Thank you.